everyone, and welcome back to the channel, and this is definitely the absolute final part of this drawing. This is going to be final details, this is going to be final values, final everything. So hopefully I might have to time lapse some areas, and this is basically just a build up and finalization of all the layers that we've done to thus far. So I'll probably only say what pencils I'll be using, but we'll be employing the exact same techniques in all the areas and finalizing all the stitching and all the metal bits and so forth. So yeah, that's the basic plan for today. And then we can move on to a new tutorial, which I've linked I have a poll in like the community post tab of the next 4 tutorials that will be happening on the channel. So you can go vote there to see which one you want first. So yeah, those will definitely be the next 4 on the channel. Hopefully that will run over the next 4 months. That's me being very hopeful. But yeah, so we're looking to the tutorials for the next like half year. It's very strange to think that far in ahead. But yeah, so we're going to finalize this. I'm going to get cracking. I will explain where something maybe new is happening. But other than that, I will tell you what pencils I'll be using, and we'll be employing the exact same techniques as we have in all previous parts. So we will get our head stuck down. You can put on some music. I won't be listening to anything, so I'll just be listening to myself scribbling away with my pencils. So yeah, I'll probably explain some of the stitching stuff, and maybe if there's some new textural, like for the leatherwork, some new things there that might need some explanation. But other than that, this will be very much final details, get your head down and do the work type of video, because I want to move along. I need to get used to the monotony of the same texture. But yeah, we need to spice things up and get going. So I am going to get cracking. I will be working most likely all over the place as per usual. So I do apologize for that in advance. But that's just the nature of following along to my tutorials. So I just quickly arranged all my stuff, so let's get on with it. So I gave an HB pencil a nice quick sharpen. I am going to start at the top here. I am going to deepen values. I'm going to enhance highlights and work in some textural elements as well. So this is very much I think the detail stage I would describe as very much your own stamp on things. The types of details you put in, how detailed do you go, all that type of thing. So this is very much where you can use more your artistic liberty and put your own signature on it. And I very much implore you to do that. So I will do what I do. You can follow along exactly, or you can completely just, flow around the drawing and kind of see where it takes you, the details and stuff. So I'm going to take my HB, going to start in this general area and just start finessing all the layers that we have put in. So the aim is for me to kind of stick to an area until I think it's done. So I'll try and stay somewhere until I think it is complete. And then move on to the next area. If I do get kind of bored, I will maybe just switch to the other side and meet myself in the middle again. But yeah, so I'm just going in with my mono eraser, so I will constantly be also taking away pencil and just refining all the highlights and stuff. I quickly just sharpened up. So I'll start adding kind of a group of pencils that I'll be using throughout. So if I mention one, just kind of keep it close by, and then you know you kind of can use it. So this is a 9B pencil. This is a Staedtler 9B, which I haven't used yet. But I know by now, because of the other Staedtlers that I use, that this is very similar to the Cretacolors. Very soft. It's slightly darker. The Cretacolors are more of a silver tone, more that true graphite velvet feel to it. But I find it's exacerbated that kind of look if you go in straight just with the B pencil itself. Layered on top of other things, that very silver graphite look kind of fades away. It becomes blacker, not entirely that much, especially with the Cretacolors, but it does tone down that look, and it also somewhat helps alleviate that shine, especially when you use powders as well. It kind of gets rid of that shine. So just back with my 9B. This 9B would come in quite handy with our metal, and those very dark shadows, and not necessarily for large areas, but for those smaller like dark lines. And you can absolutely use it. You don't always have to use these like very far end of your range, always in a very hard pressure. I do quite sometimes like the way they look if they use more softly. It just gives a different look and also a natural textural element. So as usual, if I use those dark B pencils in an area, I like to blend them out with something way opposite end of the spectrum. That just helps with the blending and remove some of those harsh lines that you might get if you're a bit heavy-handed. So you can use an F pencil for that type of thing as well. We used it for our other metal areas where we went in with a 7B and then also use, I think, an F pencil or a B pencil to just blend it out and take it into a larger space. So constantly go back and forth between your erasers and your pencils, just to continuously kind of refine the highlights. So I'm also going to go back and forth between my B pencil, my HB pencil and my 9B at this current area, just for the metal bits. This is also the stage where graphite powder starts playing less of a role, just due to what we kind of doing, because we need that crisp, those crisp edges, and the graphite powder is more for that layering up process. Just giving a 2H a sharpen. And we'll just use that to also further refine some of the values. And this is also very useful pencils to get that nice crisp, those nice crisp edges between various parts of your drawing. I wouldn't necessarily use this pencil like I did with the HB to blend out a higher range B pencil. I'd more use that for more your lower end Bs, just due to it being very different. And it will create lines and kind of worsen the sharp edge rather than blend it away. So back in with my 9B. So I'm just switching back and forth for the lighter areas between my 2H and my HB pencil. And just now going back into the leather. Well, I've got the 9B in hand. I'm just also gonna go here into this space. Also just deepen it up. And you can see what a difference just that extra step in depth makes. So I'm actually going to take a different, let's go, so this is where I'm going to start using pencils quite close together, but the ones that I know will show there will be a difference. So I'm going to take my 6B into this leather strap. Go right up to the edge. And in some areas you're going to have to be a bit more deliberate with your shadows and highlights, especially if the area is small. So here I'm kind of making it a lot darker than it's actually in the reference, just so that we've got that stark difference and that stark line between the leather and the metal. Just so that it helps the viewer's eyes just define the parts, define the areas. And it's quite useful for you as well. So I've got the 6B in hand. I'm just going to continue using it in this leather strap. So generally when I work, I tend to go a bit darker, especially if a reference is a bit more lighter in nature, a bit more toned down, just for kind of my own preference. I don't like that very like you get those highly exposed contrasts, but I like to go very deep with my shadows, where I know it will make a difference, and very crisp and very almost white with my highlights. But obviously I've already mentioned that I fill in every space with pencil, powder. Every area gets an application of some sort, and then I just remove it to a point where it looks white. Once you start adding these very dark shadows, anything that's very light next to it will look white-ish in nature. So I just use the 6B there to define some of the more textural elements and give that nice round. Leather it's flat, but round the stitching and the edges it kind of bevels. So I just use the 6B to indicate that. And then now I'm just using the HB to blend in the areas in between, define some of the stitching on the other edge. Like I said, stitching, I don't follow it exactly. It's more of I know it should be there, so I know how to fake it for small areas. I have in the past used the Sakura jelly rolls in white just for those crisper white highlights, but I think there are better white pens out there that you can employ for those very, if you want to add those crisp highlights. I know some people like, I've used them, they work fantastic in the eye for the reflections, especially if you're working on an area that's small. And because I like to create my depth with all the blending and the layers, sometimes it's when the area becomes small, it becomes very difficult to still keep that crisp highlight. If you can get your battery erasers to a very sharp point, that would work just as, I think, perfectly. I have used them in the past for that reason. And this is just my 6B pencil again. So those work fantastic as well. This is my 2H. Just want to blend in areas that have a bit of a grain. So I'm one of those people that feel like once, how do I explain this? I know I've got enough layers when I stop seeing the grain of the paper. You get that kind of grainy look to your pencils. So I like to create all the textures. Sometimes I employ that texture in certain areas, but very rarely. So every texture that I create is created with pencils. So I like to have a smooth, filled in base. So what I generally like to do is I like to take a 2H and just kind of go over those areas and smooth out, kind of fill in the gaps. Because it's a harder pencil, it won't just glide over and leave those little bumps white. So I just like to sometimes do that very lightly. You don't need to use a heavy hand at all, just to kind of smooth out that area. So I'm just gonna back in with my 6B. And sometimes certain areas I'll have to rework after I've went through and put in final layers, final details for everything. Just sometimes it's difficult for me to find that correct balance of values for certain spots. And I have a feeling this kind of general area will be one of those where I'll just have to come back and just kind of either lighten or deepen up 2H just to get rid of that bit of grainy look, and also just add definition to some of the stitching. Back in with my 6B. So here is, in this leather strap, there's very nice small little details. So what I explained, if you watched not the part 7, part 6, I explained in this general area about very small little highlights. If you zoom in very closely to this leather strap next to the stitching at the top, you'll find that exact same very small highlights. This area is too small for me to consider putting it in. This will be one of those very nice touch, that very attention to detail, that would make it even more realistic if you had this on a larger scale. That little rim of highlight that extends, it kind of stops around here with the metal. You can see it's very faint. It would be much easier to add with color because it's a different color. but it's just a little nice attention to detail highlight. That's the type of things that gets missed sometimes, especially if you start out drawing. It's those types of details that even I would have missed when I started out, because you don't pay attention to references like that. And also your skill level is at such a point where you do miss it, yes, but sometimes there are certain details where you're quite unsure on how to correctly add them in such a way that would make it, just as in the reference, barely visible but extremely nice touch. It adds a different layer to your realism. In small drawings like this, it's not necessary, because you need to be able to edit out certain stuff that won't be, it's just pointless to add them. Obviously, the more skilled you get, the smaller you can work on detailed areas, and the more you can add into a smaller drawing. But that's a nice little touch. You can even see it on the bottom stitching as well, even slightly. So I would definitely, if you want to even use just certain parts of this drawing as a larger scale practice, because it's got some very, very nice bold highlights and shadows, but also some very, very blink and you'll miss it type of details, which I always find I quite like references that are like that. And that's also one of the reasons why I take my time with drawings, because those are the types of things that I would not see initially. I would just miss it completely. Because I need time for, I've noticed, I think I've mentioned this before, that there's an app on my tablet that I quite enjoy, Happy Color. I like the very detail, like paintings that they have that you can color in, but I found that I need to kind of take my time, because I do miss a lot of, especially the smaller numbers, but once an area starts to get filled in a lot, then I start noticing the smaller stuff. So for me, once I've got like the base and the layers done, it's a lot easier for me then to shift my focus onto the smaller details and not get overwhelmed by the massive amounts of work that needs to get done. So this drawing is very complicated in itself. But you can make it more or less complicated depending on obviously the size you're going for, if it's a practice, if you maybe want to do this maybe just an area, or you want to do it for an exhibition or something like that. So these are the types of references that I do quite enjoy, because these materials, these textures, are of that type of nature where you can, it's easily recognizable, and you can break it down into very simple shadows and highlights. So you can quite get away with not having to add as much details as maybe something else, because leather and metal is defined by their very nice, especially if leather has been cleaned and you've got very good lighting. This is my 9B pencil again. This is absolutely, I think, some of the funnest materials to draw, just because of their very simple nature. You can simplify it a lot, or you can, go ham on the details. Once you get larger surfaces of metal, they start reflecting what's around them. If you work in colored pencils, this is a 2H by the way, if you would start working in colored pencils, you've got a bunch of different colors that you can employ to create them. And the same with the leather. I mean, there's 3 different colored leathers on this one drawing, and then you can include what's on the collar as well on the physical harness. So it's very much one of those all steel type materials, both of these, the leather and the metal, because obviously the more ability you have to add details in a smaller area, the more realistic you're going to get it. But even if you start out beginner, these types of, if you just know how to add shadows and highlights and blend in between, you'll get a realistic look out of both metal and leather. It's one of those very easy replicable textures. I think that's the word. To get a realistic look out of. So, which is, I think, there are obviously some materials that are just a nightmare. But these two are quite simple in nature. And I think once you get just the basic gist of being able to break them down into their basic kind of shadows and highlights, then it's smooth, easy sailing from there. This is just my 6B pencil that I'm using here. (9B). Then I'm gonna just go back in with my HB pencil. 2H just to help blend. That's because it's got a harder point. I just sometimes you add maybe a smidge of B pencil and then just use that 2H to move it around, especially in a smaller area. Back in with my HB. Just my 9B pencil. Then I'm going to go back with my 6B. Just add a better blend there. Back in with my HB. And then 2H just to go over top and fill in the gaps. So this is one of those leather straps that has got some weathering, so we're going to move on to a different one first, just for now. 6B. So here I'm going to kind of, with this strap at the back, those that hide kind of goes here. I'm going to not bother too much with the details that are there. So this is one of those bits that it's small enough that you really don't need to worry too much about its details. So I'm just gonna break it down into its most simplest form and then just leave it at that. HB pencil, just remember that you do have a slight highlighted edge right there, so just keep that in mind. HB. Get myself a B pencil. Sharpen up nicely. So I'm just gonna very lightly add some of that texture, but it's out of focus, so I'm gonna add it, but then blend over top. So it's not gonna be as visible, but you just wanna add it for some just difference, to show some difference, help the viewer's eyes with this area. And then it's got a slight highlighted edge actually, so I'm going to take that harsh line down and go in with my 2H just to blend that out. So those are the types of things that I generally only noticed right at the end. I can go over the same spot multiple times, several times, and only notice something very relevant to that part right at the end. So that edge highlight was one of them. So yeah, that's also one of the reasons why I probably naturally work on a whole bunch of drawings at the same time, just to give my eyes something different to look at. And then once I've got fresh eyes on that area or this drawing, I start to instantly notice things and see new things and maybe spot some problems that I didn't notice before. So that's just also one of the reasons that I have so much stuff, have so much projects. This is a 2B. Let's just clean this up. Just going to lighten up the area. Fix that edge. Okay. And sometimes you do need to erase more stuff than you probably would have liked, but these areas are nice and small, so it doesn't really bother me too much. And then just the 2H, obviously, to help just complete some of the lines. That doesn't need to be dark all the way through, and add some shading as well. And then I also just use the 2H to kind of complete areas, take them to an edge. Okay, we are moving along, we are getting somewhere. Let's start working on this strap with all the texture. Okay, so let's do the metal first. I'm actually going to take let's just take the 9B just to add depth, not across an entire area. You don't need to do that. Obviously, the more space you have to play with, the more you can really show the difference in values, even if they do look quite similar. So then I'm just going to take my HB and continue that 9B line upwards. Because these B pencils, they are quite, of the Cretacolors and the Staedtlers, they do get a bit larger in size. So you need to constantly sharpen them to get a nice fine point. So I don't always generally tend to do that because you waste the pencil. So I'll just, like I said, add a bit and then use a sharper low range pencil just to kind of complete that section. And you'll get the same result. Your eye kind of fills in the gap. So there I just use my 9B again and back in with my HB. So 2H. So this one doesn't have a lot of very stark highlights. So I think it's just its placement and kind of probably a bit dirty or worn. So I'm just going to, varying pressure for your 2H, just show some difference in the object. And then obviously you can later on just remove some more. So this is my 6B. That's got an edge highlight, so I'm just gonna keep it in. And those types of small little metal, I generally, you keep it in your simplest shadows and highlights. So it's more shadow than it is highlight. So it just gets one little line through. Okay, this is my 2B pencil. So here we've also got some little textural elements. That I'm just going to add in. First with my mono eraser. Then let's do HB. So this is quite a very smooth piece of leather. It's not got much interest to it. This is just my 2H pencil. So this is maybe something that I'll come back and rework a little bit after we've done some work on other areas. And just cleaning up space around it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I take my Kneaded Eraser. And this is one of those areas where I think I just need to rework it a little bit. So that's what I'm going to do. So I took away with the Kneaded Eraser. Now I'm just taking a blending stump that's already had powder on it. I'm just going over those areas and smoothing it out, getting myself a better layer base to work off of. So now I'm taking, this is my HB pencil. Let me just quickly remove that little shadow line there. There we go. So HB pencil. And then similar to what we did with this leather strap right here, you're gonna see how the wearing, the wear and tear kind of interacts with the light source. And then you're just gonna pick one that you think is your reference kind of tear. I like this one right here in kind of where the turn is in these little creases. So I'm going to use that as kind of my starting point, and then I'm just going to start adding them in with the HB pencil first. Not going to do much because of the layers that are underneath. And then here, just give it a better shape. So as you can see, very easy to remove, very easy to manipulate, very easy to correct. Back in with my HB. If you ever made a mistake or you think something just doesn't look quite right, all the soft layers really does help. So here we've got a little bit less pencil on the paper, so the HB is going to be a little bit more useful. Not so much here, but that's fine. So you'll see some of these are just cracks and others are more just kind of where the leather seems to be flaking off. Not so much an interaction with the light source. You've got a highlight here, and most of it is more at this section. And then I always struggle with when there's a bunch of lines together. It looks more than it actually is. So I know there's 3 sections, but it looks like a bazillion, so it's always a struggle when there's a bunch of lines right next to each other. My eyes does not see what it's supposed to be seeing. Always makes it look 100 times worse. Oopsie. Actually, no, that's right. But this does come up more to there. It's my 2H. Oh, not my 2H. This is my 2B pencil. I'm just using to clean up. So we're going to give that a nice dark defined edge because that's what's on the reference. It's actually the other side of this metal thingy. But that just gives us kind of a foundation to work off of. Just going to fill that in. And add in the highlight that runs on top of that line. It's too much lines. It's too much lines. 2B pencil. And then we're just gonna continue working on with the cracks and the crevices. So they look a little bit darker than they would be, just because we haven't really built up the values on the inside. So it's kind of, we're working a bit backwards, but that's fine. Just taking the 2H and defining that edge. And this one as well, while we're at it. And that looks better. So, 2B, back in with it. Add some definition. Okay, so now let's see. Let's add so this has got nothing on it. Take my kneaded eraser and just also add in somewhere the main highlights are that are not relevant to the details, just the objects actual highlights. So this is now my 2H pencil. And then actually I'm going to go back to my 2B. And just start working on the areas and switch in between that and my HB pencil. Because the HB doesn't do much in terms of adding depth, those kind of textural marks you made with your 2B will still be visible. Very much still be visible. I'm going to do the same here. But our highlight now runs here at the bottom. So if I maybe feel that I went too heavy-handed or something is maybe covers a larger area than it should be, then I'll just use my mono eraser and just take it away. And then just go back in with a pencil immediately. These areas are small enough where you can kind of make those harsh corrections. By erasing and then taking a good chunk of it away, but it's still small enough that it doesn't really make such a difference. Just blend that out. So in comparison to the other leather strap that's on that side, the light source doesn't really affect the cracks as much. It doesn't directly kind of have a continuous highlight on top of all of them. It's mostly just for the object itself. So I'm just going to use my mono eraser in that type of way. And this will feel almost like you've added all this pencil and now you're taking it all away again. It's kind of like a give and a take with your values sometimes with the layering process. You continuously do move forward, but it does sometimes feel like you're taking all that work away again. But it's very much just a continuous move forward. You just maybe do it in smaller, slower steps than maybe some other approaches to the same problem. I'm now going to switch. Let's find something else. Let's go up between our 2B and our 6B. Let me find my 4B. It's around here somewhere. There it is. So I generally like jumping in increments of 2. That for me works a treat. That's to me a big enough difference. So 6B would have been maybe a little bit too much. 3B maybe not enough. So we just, for safety's sakes, and to actually not have to do the same step twice, I'll just jump up 2. So this is my 4B pencil now. gave it a nice quick sharpen, and this is the Faber-Castell, so it's got a, keeps it nice sharp point. So we're just gonna and just take your 2H just to tone down some of those marks you made with your mono eraser. So some of these cracks do go to the edge, so just not all of them, just some of them. So also another thing to take note is you don't always have to, they don't always have to start and end at the same space. That just adds more of a natural feel, and it doesn't make it look as rigid and on purpose, really. Give some variety to it. And then some will come from the bottom here. So here I'm not very much bothered by if there's some textural stuff from the pencil itself, or it's maybe a bit of a harsh line. This area is small enough where, to me, it's kind of acceptable. I don't mind it as much. So then I'll use this 4B also to just kind of fill in that space. Add some more depth. There you go. So it's got texture. It's definitely got texture. So this is something that I'll come back to and refine more in the end. Just taking my 2H and then just refining that. And similarly here. There we go. So now I'm going to move on to the strap at the top and then kind of make them meet somewhere in the middle, because the texture does continue up. So, already started here, so I'm going to take my 2B and just define that lower edge. I haven't paid much attention to these straps or this area of the straps a lot. I'm going to take my 2B to this. So here I've got some natural texture of the 2B. I'm going to kind of not try and remove as much of. 9B pencil, just here at the back. So I'm just gonna, before I move on to this strap section, I'm gonna deepen up this area some more. And I'm going to take my 4B pencil just for lower area. Also, it's got a harder edge, so it's a bit easier to get a bit more concentrated areas of depth. So already we're deepening it up much more than what it was. And we'll just continue doing that. Take a blending brush stump, not added any powder to it. And then this is my HB. Just going to use it to bridge the gap between the lighter and the darker areas and just kind of fill it in and make it less flat looking. Similarly here, I'm going to deepen it up. I'm going to take my 9B again. Use that to use very soft pressure, just use it in certain areas to just quickly add a lot of depth. Here by the edge and bottom here. And then back in with my HB just to kind of smooth that out and also even build up on the depth even more. This is just my 2H pencil. So that's already darker than what it was. Now I'm gonna just move along. Maybe where's that 8B? So this is just the Faber-Castell 8B. Just a little bit blacker. So just overall just darkening up this area. HB pencil. And then I'm going to take my 2H just to get rid of that grainy look and just fill in that space. So with the lighting it's a bit difficult, but it is a lot darker. There you can also see the nice shine. But it's got much more depth. There's more of an accurate look at what it maybe would look like. Okay, back to the straps. I'm gonna go to the top. Let's start here at the top. This is where I'm gonna grab a F pencil. Have not worked really at the top here at all. So just going to use the F pencil to help me out with just defining the spaces even more. Lots of lines. And then also just use it to clean up the edge. I can't even see actually what I'm doing, sorry. Still just using my F pencil just to map out my space. And define my edges. That's a little too harsh depth for that area, so I'm just gonna take it away. And just redefine it with my F pencil. So I'm gonna kind of be working on the strap overall. 6B. Just to deepen up this corner here. And then we might as well just take it here. After I'm done with the strap, I'm then going to move on to this little section of metal and stitching. And then we're going to continue our way right. Back in with my F pencil. Yes. Actually, before I go on, let me just remove some of that. And back in. F pencil in hand. Kind of also use it to fill in that spaces, because it's very similar in value. As well as this one right here. Similarly, just going to use a lighter pressure. Just fill in that bottom section. We'll go back in to refine all the softer highlights. Actually, just for my own sanity, I'm going to quickly just do this metal and stitching section, and then probably do some more of that, and then come back to the leather. Just need some variety back in my life. So I'm just giving my 9B a sharpen. Let's see. So you can see instantly what just a bit of 9B does. So we're going to continue that on towards the bottom as well. It won't be as harsh, but just that little bit of oomph really does make a difference to the overall look of the drawing. Just adds some interest, really, and really defines the shapes. Whereas before it was there, but it wasn't really, not really as defined as maybe we would have liked. There we go. So now let's do a little bit of the stitching. So I'm going to go in with a 2B. I'm going to first see what is happening. Then I'm going to define this middle section even more. So here I'm going to be a bit more deliberate. There's really no time for true shading, so to speak. So I'm going to pick a pencil, kind of get in, get out. It's already kind of making a difference, you can see, just takes away that monotony, that flat look, and you can easily later on, which we obviously will do, just take a different depth of pencil, maybe something like a 4B or 5B, and just in some areas add some more depth. And then you can go in with your mono eraser and do the same, add in some highlights in some spaces, not necessarily having to do it all over. So I'm here for this, I'm just gonna take my 2H. So the stitching might be one of those things that I kind of just leave till last, but just get the basic gist of it complete. This drawing is not necessarily for anything, so I'm not too worried about fully completing it. Obviously for the tutorial's sake, we'll get it done to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm happy with this. But might need some reworking at some point if I just give myself, especially with this stitching. I mean, I'm not exactly what I find pleasant. Just keeping to the 2B. A little do the same here at the bottom. Obviously these highlights and reflections you'll see is something we'll do at the end. For this smaller section, I'm just going to take my 2H just for the edge. Actually, let's just do the metal first. This is just one of my mono erasers that I'm just going to use. For the white little parts of the stitching. And then we might as well add some of that reflection, just ever so lightly, and just brush over it. You can do the same with a blending stump as well. So I'm just going to take my F pencil, and very similarly to what we did with the metal on the side, I am just going to continue on and kind of build up the values in the sides metal. And I'll use the same, the 9Bs, the 2Bs, 5Bs, not 5B, 6Bs, 4B, to kind of create that look. I'm going to just keep a blending stump close, as well as my mono eraser. Just going to take my 9B and deepen up this area here. And just there where we used our mono eraser, just at the top, very light pressure. This is just my F pencil again. And I'm just gonna take my 6B, give it a quick sharpen. Just for the finer, darker shadows that I need to be a little bit more precise with. And I'm just going to take my 2H to lightly fill in that white space, just so that it's not as stark, and then as well a bit more pressure for kind of the highlights that's underneath this leather strap. 6B. And then just my F pencil. These areas are going to be a bit more difficult to really get in those highlights, so you have to really simplify all your shapes and your values as well, just so that it doesn't become like just a mess of values. It must still have some sort of shape to it. This is just my 6B again. And then just, I'm going to go back and forth between my 6B and my F. As long as it still looks like you're actually drawing metal chains and metal links, then you are doing just fine. We can refine more at the end. Once we kind of have everything done, then we can go back and see which areas needs a little bit more work, especially if you think an area is maybe lacking a bit of highlights or shadows, then one can easily just go back and fix it. So I'm just using my F pencil also to fill in the gaps, which is where you're going to have to start strategically placing your highlights and your darker shadow values. So I'm just going to go into my mono eraser, and this will generally help you to decide which is your values that you need to retain, or the placement of your most important values is those that are really helping to define the shape within this area. Back in with my F pencil. And then I'm just going to take my 6B and clean up my mono eraser so that I can get a nice sharp point. Just for a little bit of highlight there. It might be difficult for you to see, but just barely making it visible. There we go. You can go back in with the F pencil and just define it again. I'm just going to take my tiniest little blending stump just in these smaller areas, just to move the pencil around that's already there. Especially around here at the bottom. Just to blend it out more, get rid of that kind of more scratchy, grainy, messy pencil marks. F pencil again. And then once I'm done with this section, I'm going to move to the far right and then work my way to the middle again. Just gonna take a brush, it's got nothing on it. So we're gonna move to our far right. Actually, let me just see. So at the moment we've got a very darker left side than we do right side, but the reference is kind of that way, but we can bring in some depth. So I'm going to kind of work here first, and then do this section. Cover this up for the glare. There we go. Let's see. Let's go 9B. So I'm going to put in some darker values first, add some depth to areas that's underneath here, and I'm going to switch between that and the 2B. Also use the 4B just for some of the areas within this leather strap. No, 6B rather. Sometimes you pick up a pencil and you see it's not really doing what you want it to do. Then this is generally where you bump up just one extra step, but don't mind going 2. So since the 6B is close by. And obviously this needs some very, very more crisp highlights, a lot more whiter highlights. Back in my 9B. If it's not sharp enough, just give it a sharpen. Just especially if you've got a softer tip to the pencil. So start heavy pressure and then you work circular motions out from there. And then you can even use your 6B. It's kind of an in-between step as well. And I'm gonna go my HB pencil. You can, this would probably work with an F as well, but I'm just gonna go with this HB, and then we're gonna use the HB as well, just to deepen up this leather strap. I'm gonna give it a nice addition. Just make sure that you also accentuate kind of that the little detail near the edge. And then take your blending stump and just blend it in. And this is just a 2H pencil that I'm using here. Mono eraser. Start adding in some highlights. So this will be a bit larger than they should be, but that's fine. Also going to add some, so you've got some very subtle highlights around the stitching as well. Back in my 9B. So I'm going to significantly darken up these areas just to help with the contrast of the stuff above. I'm still just using my 9B, but very light pressure, and because it's softer, the light pressure actually is a lot easier than, say, for instance, if you're maybe using the Faber-Castells, because they're a bit harder than these pencils. So I'm just going to go HB, yeah. And just blend out that area, and also sharpen up that edge. Blending stump. This is a 2H pencil. Back in with my HB. 2B. We're just going to deepen up this section here. And also kind of this negative space. You can use your 6B for this, but I'm just using the 2B because I've got it in hand. Then I'm just going to take my 6B, deepen up. In here you've also got that very small highlights. You've got some stitching peeking through. But to me this is not really essential to the overall look or to a specific object. So I'm just not going to add it. If this was a larger drawing on a larger scale, then absolutely, if I've got the space, I'm going to add it. So that's kind of my thought process. If you've got the space, then add as much as you can, because even then it's good practice, even if we don't get it right the first time. If we've got the space and you notice it, then yeah, always add it. But smaller spaces you've got to edit and be able to tell the difference, whether or not it adds to the whole picture or it's just a nice to have. So I'm just going to take my blending stump, kind of go over this whole section. And then I'm also going to take a brush with some powder and just on this metal kind of trim, just to give it a softer blend. I'm actually going to add it to the bells as well. And then I'll just go over their whole space anyways. So just ignore what I said. Okay, so I'm gonna take, this is my kneaded eraser. I'm gonna use the kneaded eraser first, and then I'm gonna go in with the mono over the top for some of the areas, not all of them, just some. Like here at the top, I prefer, this is where the kneaded eraser really is at its most useful, is for when you add like a light bit of powder or pencil and you just want to take ever so slightly off of value, then I like to add use the kneaded eraser instead. Also for larger areas, to kind of start the highlighting process, and then you go in with your mono eraser and you basically just highlight the highlight, that you have some difference there as well. So now this is my mono eraser. So here we've got some This is where a battery eraser would work very nicely. But you've got some, the metal's not smooth, so it catches the light. But that can also be accentuated with pencil as well. And similarly with your pencils, lighter pressure and harder pressure on your mono eraser will also obviously take away more or take away less. So just keep that in mind as well. And then I'm kind of going to use the mono eraser to kind of just help get rid of some of the sharper edges around these more pronounced highlights. Just to kind of add some variation. You obviously don't need to do this. If you can, then do it. But it's not necessary really. I'm just going to take this is my HB pencil. Work on the depth down here. This is my 9B. Very slight pressure. Don't want to add too much. And even this 9B will aid in kind of that not entirely smooth look of the metal. So this is where you use just the natural texture of the pencil to your advantage on your paper. Even for the bells, it would work very nicely. So I'm using the side of the pencil, I'm not using the point. This is just my HB. still need to do this little section, but I'm gonna do it with that part of the leather. This is just Maeve pencil. I'm just going to go over top with just fill in the gaps. I'm going to go back to the leather straps. We're going to work a bit on this side. This is my 2B pencil. my F pencil. Just gonna start deepening up the strap itself. And then just use a blending stump to blend that in and also fade it into this highlighted section. And then the same, just blend it out. Back in with my 2B pencil. And then F pencil as well. So here this leather strap has got an edge highlight, so I'm just going to also just add that in. And it's got some highlighting on the side, also in here. Should actually do this with the Kneaded Eraser, but it's fine. And also just the reflection off of the metal on the bottom side of this loop. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the strap right here. So I'm going to take, let's just first take a line B to this darker area right here next to it. Let's actually first F pencil. quickly just fill this in and then take your 2H. In that out, and then I'm also just gonna just switch between the 2H and the F. And then I'm going to take my 6B and just deepen up this edge. Also gonna go into, just so here the cracks are below the highlights, so I'm just gonna use this 6B very light pressure. To start kind of adding more cracks and crevices. So we've already got the highlights in, but I'm going to add some additional lines as well, softer pressure. Some of these cracks have also got, so you've got the crack and then you've got your shadows underneath. So you've got a darker line, more pronounced, and then your shading below that. So just with varying pressure of just your 6B, you can create some different values and interests. So here we've got very pronounced one and cracks running down. So only in this bottom section do you really have a lot of cracks that run downwards. So very much like when we draw fur, direction of everything is still important. So 2H. Actually, I'm gonna go F. And we will come back and reinforce our highlights, but we're just playing around with the actual more pronounced lines and then the shading and shadows in between. You give that a once over with the brush. And then just the mono eraser to come back and reinforce some of those highlights. So again, not really being precise. Kind of by now you've seen the reference enough to know how the light source behaves. And just gonna go back in with my 6B to add more lines. There we go. Let's move along. So I'm going to keep my 6B in hand. I'm just going to go in these areas. Start working my way up again. I'm going to take my 2H pencil and then just start deepening up this area. And then just taking the mono eraser for this highlights down here and at the side. Back in with my 6B, shadow there in the corner. And then also just for the line at the top, there in the shadows. All in that space, and also this one here. This is still just my 6B pencil that I'm using. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of, this is a new day for me, so I have no idea where I left off, like just moments ago. So what I'm gonna do is focus also on this area, and continue working on building up all the values, the stitching, work on the rivets and everything. So yeah, I'm gonna get stuck in with it. I feel like there's quite a lot to do and my motivation is running quite low, but we will soldier through, continue on, and get this done. So let me see. So let's work a little bit on this stitching here. So I've just sharpened up a B pencil. just gonna kind of just work in this general area, not much rhyme or reason, just trying to kind of find my way into the drawing again. So for everything that we will be doing in this final part, it's very much a rinse and repeat type of situation. Everything has already kind of, the methods has been talked through. I mean, we're just now building up the values. There's no sort of new technique or anything. This is merely just building up our values, our contrasts, getting the exposure right and all of that. And then obviously refining our details. So I'm just taking this mono eraser just because, just to add some highlights here and there, find the edges. There we go. So now I'm just going to take my B pencil and kind of going to have to start working on the stitching, kind of refining that and establishing that. So the methods will remain the same. Like I said, we are just merely deepening, lightening, refining, kind of bringing everything into focus. I'm even going to use this B pencil in the metal as well while I'm at it. So there are certain pencils or certain times where you kind of use one pencil just to get into the groove of things again, and then you build up from there. So there I've gone and refined that part of the stitching. It's looking a bit more manageable now. So I'm just going to do the same at the bottom. Once you kind of take away that fuzzy look, it's very much like those beginning layers where you are ignoring the details completely and you're building up and building up, and it just kind of breaks down the drawing into more manageable chunks so that you don't get overwhelmed by the amount of work that needs to get done. So that kind of method of slowly building up just kind of also helps a lot with the mental aspect, I found, which makes things a little bit easier. So I'm going to take I can find it. No idea how this happens. Looking for a pencil that I know is here, but I just can't find it. There we go. So I just gave an 8B a sharpen. And I am just going to kind of work in this general area of the smoother leather and also up here, just to add more depth. And this is very much also one of those steps that really helps to just get rid of that fuzzy, very similar looking values. Just adding that shadow, really deep shadows, just helps kind of make things more manageable and easier to see. And the reason I'm using this 8B, just because it's a lot darker, and I'm going to use softer motions and just use it also to deepen up this section and get rid of that kind of halo highlight type thing, and just also give it a blend. So this kind of smoother leather has got some very subtle differences in values, where the light's reflecting off of. So, but that will build up and get to as we move along. And I'm going to keep this 8B in hand, and we're just going to also go into some of our metal areas, our metal bits and bobs, and some of the other leather work. Yes. So I'm not really paying much attention to the reference. I mean, we kind of already did most of the definition work. So I've already got a blueprint and a guideline for some darker or lighter values, and I'm kind of just winging it really. So as you can see, just some depth really starts to sharpen up, and then we can just go back in and refine even more with other more finer pencils, like that B pencil or an F or even an HB would work just fine. And just with this HB, not always using it at a harder pressure, just also keeping the soft touch as well, and you get a much softer kind of addition of depth. And I sometimes just like to kind of go in certain areas and just very lightly just add it kind of on the edges or around a certain deeper shadow, and that just kind of accentuates certain areas a little bit more. And if you feel like you're not that confident doing that, then you don't have to necessarily do this step. It's just something I like to do. I like to, when I go up in values, I like to really take those pencils all over, just like I do with the kind of the Fs and the HBs and the Bs. And that just kind of, I think, helps me not have it so concentrated just in certain areas, and it kind of is throughout the whole drawing, if that makes sense. And I'm just using this HB as well. Not HB, 8B. Down here. So I'm kind of going all over with it. And that's the whole point. You want to be able to know how to use all your pencils everywhere. You kind of want majority of your elements to have that full kind of range of pencil, even going into this, and it gives a different kind of feeling. Gives it a bit more life, really, rather than just having certain types of pencils in a certain area or certain kind of range of values to be just made up by these set pencils. You kind of want to be able to use your whole range to create it. There we go. So I'm going to go back to my B pencil. And you can very much treat these little fluffs as fur, because that's basically just the same texture. Doesn't need to be treated any differently. I just haven't approached it very similarly, to be honest with you. But the end result you should have a similar look and feel to it. I'm just gonna blend down here quickly. Take a mono eraser, just like you would if it was fur. I'm not being very precise about it. Remember to go into the right direction. Even though this is not laying over top of anything, it still has a direction that it goes. And you can see, very simple, very easy. It's not really. This is just a 4B. And then I'm just going to take blending stump again. Give it a once over with the brush. And back in with my mono. just a little bit more precise. This is a 2H. And I'm just going to go for more the lighter values here. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not going to stick around. Probably not going to finalize this drawing as much as I probably would have liked, due to me just being over it. But I will get most of it covered. I will kind of explain to you kind of how you can complete it all the way. But that's just the nature of things, as I do want to move along. My motivation has completely disappeared for this drawing, to be honest. Let's see. This is still just my B pencil. I might revisit it in the future, but I don't know. I'm almost kind of feeling at that point where I'd either restart it or just never touch it again. Obviously, I will use the exact same methods. And just sometimes when it comes to drawings, you kind of reach a point where there's lack of motivation due to just the massive amount of work, and then lack of motivation due to you just not being into the drawing anymore. I think this will definitely be one that I'd probably revisit down the line and actually redo, maybe even on a larger scale, just due to the quality of the reference itself, which I think would make for a very nice, just personal project, really. But yeah, I think for this final part, where are we up to now? It's an hour and a half, and then it's almost 3 hours now already. But yeah. So my motivation has completely left the building, and that's completely fine. You know, if this was a commission I would push through, absolutely. if this, since this is just a personal project, there's no real reason for me to finish it on my end. But if you do finish this, every single method that has been used in the previous, where are we now, 7 parts, is what will be used, or what I would have used to finish this drawing completely. I've already shown you the complete range from 2H to 9B. You just keep building up those values, you keep building up the textures and the methods. If you want to refine your textures, you basically just do what we already did, just at a much more finer and slower pace. The range you will use is exactly the same. You already saw I use an 8B just very softly here. Do the exact same thing, go back in with your 2H and your H for those kind of in between blended values, your mono eraser, give it a little blend and another little touch up of highlights, and you'd be done. Same goes for the leatherwork and the metal. Now the metal is very much not necessarily, I still would have added just not add graphite to your brush, but just take the brush and give it a blend. Do your highlights, you can use a B pencil or an HB in your deepest parts just to kind of define those darker lines, those shadows, make it crisp. I wouldn't necessarily go, we've already done the 8B, we've already done the 7B, and I think the 9B as well. Just use a low grade B pencil that's harder, just to crisp up those kind of darker edges, and go in with your mono eraser and an F pencil and you'd be done. The stitching, exact same principle basically as the metal. You would approach it as you would have a braid, very similar to that, very similar shading, and obviously there's not much space here that's why actually if I do redo it, I'll do it on a larger scale. Then you can really add those values in the stitching as well, the leather stitching, which they do have some very nice shading and not details, but you know, you've got all the dirt and the weathering. The rivets you will treat exactly the same as all your other metal pieces. The wood, let me see, exactly the same as you would the leather, and this you would just take away, I would suggest your kneaded eraser, not necessarily your mono. For your reflections that are here, I'd go with your mono eraser, but use your kneaded, build up that values very slightly, as it's very similar to what's the surrounding area up here as well. And you can either go really ham with the details, or you can take it to a point where you also feel like, okay, I've done enough, I can't do any more. But I can do a lot more. I've just I'm tired. I need to move along. I want to move along. I'm very excited for the next 4 tutorials up on the channel. That will be up on the channel. So I want to get started filming that right away. I'm very, very inclined to redo this as a larger drawing, just for, you know, all the details and stuff. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. There's quite a lot of just tips and tricks on both of these materials. Obviously, both of these materials will feature in other tutorials as well. One of the 4 upcoming tutorials has leather in it. So yeah, we will revisit it again at a different kind of angle and more close up. But the principles are exactly the same. The method will be exactly the same. Everything up until this point you can absolutely use to finish and complete and detail out this drawing a lot more. The details, we've already done detail work in the metal that you can apply to your other metal pieces. We've already done detail work in the leathers that you can apply to your other leather. And for this kind of smoother leather, you would very much similarly use your kneaded eraser for that softer kind of reflections, if I might say, almost like you would have up here. And don't forget your edge highlights, your little highlights in your shadows, and then everything will be fine. The little bells, you just continue building up on that. So yeah, cheers everyone, and I'm very excited to see you for the next tutorial for November. Cheers!